everybody, my name is Dr. Talia Marcheggiani, and today I'm preparing some dessert for a holiday party, and I thought this would be a great opportunity to talk to you guys about one of my favorite healthy naturopathic snacks, homemade chocolate. So a lot of my colleagues are having debates about what's the best brand, the healthiest brand of chocolate that you can buy in a grocery store or health food store. And I always tell them, why don't you just make your own chocolate? Because then you can control how much sugar you put into it, and you can add other healthy ingredients and make a really healthy snack. Essentially, chocolate is just cocoa butter and cocoa powder, and that's it. And so you can buy those two ingredients in organic forms and you can cook them together and make chocolate. And so today I'm going to be making some little chocolate fat bombs with pumpkin seeds. I'm going to add a little bit of gelatin to them, and I'm going to be adding a bit of cream coconut. So these are all of my favorite ingredients to heal your mood and hormones, and I'm going to be throwing them all into this delicious dessert. I have a blog article, and it's a guide to healthy naturopathic snacking that you can check out. And basically in this video I talk about how blood sugar regulation is often at the root of many health concerns that I see in my practice. And the more I practice, the more I see that most of us have some kind of blood sugar dysregulation. And this is showing up in people when, in terms of anxiety and craving sugar and feeling brain fog after a meal, waking up in the middle of the night, because cortisol, our stress hormone, is a glucocorticoid which actually increases our blood sugar for us, and it regulates our blood sugar. So if you're having these blood sugar crashes throughout the day, your body's going to need to release cortisol, which is going to put some stress on your adrenal glands and on your hypothalamus, pituitary, and adrenal axis. So I'm seeing a lot of chronic stress and chronic fatigue as a result of blood sugar dysregulation. And then of course you have conditions with insulin resistance, right? Like metabolic syndrome, weight gain, and conditions like polycystic ovarian syndrome, where people's cells are not responding to insulin. And insulin is a hormone that is released in response to blood sugar increasing, and it helps our cells take in sugar so that the sugar can fuel us. So first you need a saucepan. Okay, here's my saucepan. I'm gonna put my stove onto medium-high. I'm gonna add some cocoa butter. Looks like this. I'm just adding it straight to the pot, but you might want to use a double boiler with some glassware. Then I'm gonna add some creamed coconuts. Right, so you can get this in a grocery store. I've already taken the coconut oil portion out of it, so this is just the coconut solids. It's literally the most delicious thing on earth. Sometimes I eat this as my dinner. It's going to be a mixture of coconut and cocoa butter. The coconut is optional. And you're going to let that melt. While we let that melt, I'm going to talk to you guys about blood sugar regulation. Energy from food is measured in calories. And we all hear about calories and how terrible they are for us. But calories is how, that's how we get energy from our food. Calories measure how much energy our food gives us. And the macronutrients in our food are what contain calories. Our macronutrients are fat, protein, and carbohydrates, and to a certain extent alcohol, though alcohol is not really a fuel source. Well, depending on your personal opinion about it. When we ingest these macronutrients, which give us energy, our cells need to receive the energy, because they don't just go automatically into our cells. They need to be digested, and hormones need to regulate how much energy our cells need. So insulin is our friend, because when we eat foods that contain carbohydrates and to a certain extent protein, our insulin rises, and our insulin is what helps our cells receive glucose. Protein can spike insulin a little bit to a certain extent, because our body can use protein and turn it into glucose, which then can raise blood sugar. Anytime our blood sugar rises, insulin needs to be secreted to keep our blood sugar under control. Our body functions optimally when blood sugar is kept to a certain point, so it doesn't go too high, it doesn't go too low. Fat does not spike insulin. So fat can be either stored as energy, so we're kind of like camels in that instead of storing water, we store fat. We store energy for times of scarcity. So instead of camel humps, we have lovely lady lumps. I told that joke at a senior center and nobody laughed. So we're basically carrying energy on our bodies, and that's formed by fat. And fat also protects our tissues, it protects our bones, and it makes most of our brain matter. So I want you guys to forget everything that you heard about fat being bad for you, and also to forget about saturated fats being bad for you. Okay, so cocoa butter and coconut is mostly saturated fat, and saturated fat is actually really helpful for creating our hormones, and it's very stable at high temperatures, which is why we can boil and we can melt cocoa. I really love coconut as one of my favorite fats because coconut contains something called medium chain triglycerides. Medium chain triglycerides are medium chain fatty acids that are used as energy right away by our cells, our mitochondria. So when you eat something like coconut or straight medium chain triglycerides, you get a burst of energy, and it actually helps fuel our brain. So the cocoa butter's melted, and I'm just slowly melting the coconut cream. So when I talk about blood sugar regulating, it's really important to keep in mind that when we have meals, we don't just want to have carbohydrates on their own. So remember that carbohydrates will spike your blood sugar, which will then result in insulin secretion, which is going to keep our blood sugar going on this roller coaster ride. So it's going to spike our blood sugar, insulin will be secreted to drive our blood sugar down. Insulin is a great hormone because it helps our cells take in energy, but it's also a fat storage hormone. All right, it's a hormone that tells our body to store fat, it tells our body to build up muscle. That's great if you're a bodybuilder, but if you're trying to lose weight or trying to regulate your hormones or keep your blood sugar steady, you don't want to have insulin being secreted in large amounts, especially if you're insulin resistant, because your cells are not responding to insulin. So your body's going to need to release even more insulin to try and manage your blood sugar. So remember, carbohydrates spike your insulin more than any other macronutrient. Protein can also raise insulin because our body takes protein and makes it into glucose through a process called gluconeogenesis, and fat doesn't really release insulin at all, as our body will either store it or use it for energy, depending on the kinds of fats that we're eating, and depending on whether we've just eaten food or if we're in a fasted state. So our brain can use ketone bodies made from fat for energy, but it prefers to rely on glucose from sugar. So what I tell my patients to do is to, first of all, always have a 12-hour fast, at least a 12-hour fast in your day. This might look like stopping eating after dinner and at 7 p.m. and not eating again until breakfast at 7 a.m. Instead, just consuming herbal teas and water. This gives your body a chance to rest. It gives your digestive system a chance to clean itself out and your cells a chance to repair. And it also teaches your body to be metabolically flexible, which means that your body, when it's finished burning off sugar, it then goes into its fat stores and it starts making ketone bodies. I'm going to add a bit of coconut oil to my chocolate. Therefore, fasting for at least 12 hours every single day is really important for giving our body a break, allowing it to clean out, to improve digestion, and to keep us managing our blood sugar on our own during the nighttime, right? So if we're relying on constant intake of carbohydrates to keep our blood sugar steady, that's going to affect our ability to sleep because you need to be fasting for at least 8 hours to have a restful sleep, right? What often happens to a lot of my patients is that their blood sugar will dip in the middle of the night, where they normally would crave carbohydrates during the day, and then their body needs to release cortisol to get their blood sugar back under control, which wakes them up in the middle of the night. So if you're having problems staying asleep while you're sleeping, or you're waking up in the early hours, like 2 to 4 a.m., which is extremely common for a lot of my stressed out patients, then it's a good idea to assess your blood sugar regulation. The next thing you want to do as soon as you wake up in the morning is have a complete breakfast. So a mistake a lot of people make is waking up in the morning and just consuming carbohydrate, such as fruit or cereal, or, like a fat-free yogurt, with some sugar added to it, or even like a granola bar. So when you wake up in the morning, you want to get your circadian clock, your circadian rhythm moving, and you want to get your stress hormones to be secreted. And so this means having a fat and protein rich breakfast. So think, a good portion of eggs with avocado and spinach, or a really nice full fat yogurt, or kefir and adding pumpkin seeds to that. Or if you're going to have an oatmeal in the morning, adding lots of nut butters and seeds to it, and making sure that it contains lots of protein and fat. This breakfast should last you until noon. Okay, so a lot of my patients will wake up, have fruit or have a small breakfast, and then they'll be hungry again at 10 o'clock. and then they'll be hungry again at noon. And so they're kind of constantly eating something with carbohydrates in it every 3 hours, because after 3 hours our body burns through the glucose from our meal and starts using up our glucose, our blood glucose, and then it needs to tap into glycogen, which is stored in our muscle, in our liver, which is a starch that we store, breaks that down, and then eventually we're supposed to be moving into using ketone bodies as fuel. However, if we're on this blood sugar roller coaster, we're going to be craving carbohydrates every 2 to 3 hours. All right, guys. So I've almost melted all of the coconut. I added some coconut oil as well. Now I'm going to add the cocoa powder. So I like to add a lot of it because I want to make this really rich and chocolatey. And I'm just going to mix it in until my chocolate is uniform and consistent. I'm going to turn the heat down a little bit too. So you can see this happening. So here we go. This is making chocolate. I'm going to turn this down really low so it doesn't burn. And I'm going to be adding pumpkin seeds. Cacao nibs and a bit of gelatin to these little muffin cups. Okay, I should have explained. This is a little bit of an improvisation in terms of this recipe. I haven't made it before. So hopefully it turns out because I'm bringing it to a holiday party. All right, so you've fasted for 12 hours. You've had a nice big fat and protein-rich breakfast. Now it's lunchtime and you're finally starting to get hungry again. Right, so your meals lasted you about 5 hours. I love pumpkin seeds because they have protein in them. So things like peanuts and walnuts, they have a little bit of protein, but actually pumpkin seeds are quite a rich protein profile. And they're actually great for vegans because they contain tryptophan, which is an essential amino acid that we need to make serotonin and melatonin. And so, a lot of my vegan patients who have anxiety or depression are sometimes lacking tryptophan because it's not very abundant in plant-based foods. So pumpkin seeds are a must. And it's actually great to have a quarter cup of pumpkin seeds as a snack. Right now I'm going to add some gelatin. I love gelatin is made from the conjunctive tissue of animals. It's gonna actually keep this mixture together. And gelatin is so great because it's essentially collagen, which is what makes up our skin, hair, nails, our bones, our joints, and actually the tight junctions in our gut. So bone broth is a really great thing to do, which is really rich in collagen. Bone broth keeps our tight junctions in our intestine together, so it actually heals leaky gut, which is a source of inflammation. All right, so this is my concoction here. I'm going to take my chocolate, turn it off, and I'm going to add, let's see here what I'm doing. I'm going to add some of it to this muffin tray. And so basically it's going to solidify and make these kind of like chocolatey things. Oh, I totally forgot to put stevia in it. It's not going to be sweet. Yeah, so usually for sweetness, you can add whatever you like. You can do honey, you can do maple syrup, but I usually just use stevia, and then most of the time I forget. So this is one of those times where this is not going to be sweet. And I'm going to stir it up a little bit so that everything gets covered, and so there's not this like glob of gelatin sort of in the middle. This is my cooking style, guys. All right, so where were we with our blood sugar regulation? So now you're having lunch, right? So now you're finally starting to get hungry. So what should you have for lunch? So you want to make sure that your meal contains protein, fat, and perhaps carbohydrates, okay, depending on your activity level, your goals, sort of what your weight is, and also your tolerance for carbohydrates and your health status, right? So you want to eat less carbohydrates if you're suffering from some kind of like insulin resistant condition, or if you're very sedentary, or if you're trying to lose weight. And so like what an example of a good meal for lunch would be, right, is maybe you're having like a big salad with lots of veggies, right? Because veggies contain all of our micronutrients, our vitamins and minerals. So you're having your veg, and then you're, adding some good protein to that. So if you're an omnivore, that might look like chicken or beef or fish. If you're a vegetarian, you're gonna have to, figure out what's a good protein source for you, and it might look like some legumes. So I'm just mixing this up here. It might look like legumes, or or you can do pumpkin seeds, or you can do a scoop of something like stevia, or one of my favorite vegan sources of protein, spirulina. It's about 4 tablespoons, gives you 24 grams of protein. So I tell people to try and aim for about 30 grams of protein a meal, right? Just to give you an idea. About 25 grams of protein is what is in a chicken breast, okay? Just to give you a sense of what 30 grams might be like. I'm gonna have to add some stevia to this because I'm making it for friends, and I don't know if they're going to be super into the idea of unsweetened chocolate. I mean, they're already going to be eating some gelatin in here. But it's going to be really great for their guts. So I'm just going to add some stevia to here. Okay, so these are Sweetly Stevia. Really, you just want to add like a drop type of thing, because it's really strong. So stevia actually, so no calories and no sugar in it, and it actually regulates our insulin a little bit, which is nice. And I'm going to add a bit of sea salt, tiny pinch. So these actually make like a pretty good snack because, and I'll explain later. Okay, so now you've had your lunch, right? A big salad with some protein, and then you've got some fat in your salad. So maybe you have a couple tablespoons of olive oil, or perhaps, an avocado, or maybe you're eating soup and you've got some ghee in there, or a nice big stir fry. One of my favorite things to do is cook up coleslaw, because it's already chopped up, or some cauliflower rice, which now you can buy in the frozen food section. And so you're essentially like, if you think of a plate, half your plate is made up by non-starchy veg. A quarter of it is going to be your proteins. And then that quarter can be divided, the last remaining quarter can be divided again into maybe some starches like sweet potato or rice or quinoa, and some healthy fats like avocado or olives or coconut. Okay, so one of my favorite things to do when I'm making, when I'm cooking for myself, is to take some coleslaw from the salad section, or cauliflower rice, which you can buy in the frozen food section, and maybe some ground beef or some chicken and some curry spices, and mixing that together. And so that's like a nice low carb, nutrient rich meal that I can have. So you're sort of like de-emphasizing the carbohydrates. So I tell my patients when they're meal planning, think of your protein first, because that's not often readily available. Fill up with as many veggies, non-starchy veggies. These are veggies that grow above the ground, like think leafy greens. Fill up on as many of those colorful green veggies as possible. And then think of like a nice good fat to add to your meal. So either cooking in coconut oil or ghee or butter, or adding avocado and olive oil to your salad, or adding nuts and seeds. And then think about your carb, right? So this is sort of the reverse of how our society is designed, where you think of like rice first, and then there's like a sprinkle of vegetables and protein on top. Or you think of like, like you're getting a plate of pasta, same type of deal. It's like, what's for dinner? Pasta or pizza. It's like all bread, and then you have a sprinkle of, maybe a little bit of fat in the form of cheese, and maybe some veggies in the tomato sauce. Usually there's sugar added to that. So this is what you're doing. So you're doing this kind of idea for lunch, and then you're thinking of having dinner, maybe around 6 o'clock. Okay, so a lot of us, we should be able to last 5 hours between meals, but our bodies are all different, and so a lot of us need a snack. So I'm thinking of teachers, because teachers often don't have time to have a really big lunch, and they usually eat lunch pretty early. Well, I'm thinking of people that just need something to put in their bodies. So I say things like pumpkin seeds, right? So you've got your protein, you've got these really good omega-3 fatty acids. They also have zinc and magnesium. There's really great superfoods. So a quarter cup of pumpkin seeds, which are nut friendly if someone has allergies. They're dry, they keep really well. You can keep them in the glove compartment of your car. You can keep them in your pocket. Like I have some patients who are servers and sort of on their feet constantly. They can just toss some pumpkin seeds in their mouths on the way to the washroom, and then they have a snack. Or you can do something like this. So this is essentially a carb-free snack. Okay, so here we have my chocolate. These are kind of like these fat bombs. See, brutta ma buona. It's a little bit messy looking. Okay, and so they contain some good fats, some cacao butter, some coconut, and some like coconut solids. They contain pumpkin seeds. There's a little bit of gelatin in there. And I also threw in some cacao nibs, and then I sweetened it with stevia and added a little bit of sea salt. Now what I'm gonna do is freeze them, okay? Or you can put them in the fridge. So they're tucked away in the fridge, you can put them in the freezer too, and then we wait. Another option is I like to lay out a baking tray full of nuts and seeds, maybe coconut flakes, and then I pour the chocolate on top. And then you get this, and then I freeze it and you get this nice tray of chocolate. And then I break it up and make chocolate bark, and that's another really great, delicious chocolate. All right, we're back, and I've taken the tray of chocolate out of the fridge or the freezer. The freezer will solidify it more quickly. And here you go. You have a solid chocolate cup that you can just pull apart like this. And here you go, you have this kind of like chocolate cupcake, and it contains gelatin, it contains healthy fats, it contains some protein in the form of pumpkin seeds and some cacao, and then some really great flavonoid-rich chocolate. You can cut these up and, or you can just pack one as a snack. It might melt a little bit in hot weather, but it should keep solid in this cold winter temperature that we're dealing with right now. My name is Dr. Talia Marcheggiani. This was a little lesson on blood sugar and a chocolate recipe.